Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for taking out time on a Wednesday evening. I know it's right in the middle of the day and you would rather get over with your evenings and start off just family time, but thanks for coming every third Wednesday of the month. We really appreciate all your time and effort that you put into advocating for better streets in your community. All of you know the topic for tonight, which is going to be Safe Routes to School 101 and what bike advocates can do. With the audience that we have here today, I don't need to explain why we're going to talk about safe routes and why it is important. But I'll just still throw in a couple things so that we can get our minds started thinking in that direction before we move on to our amazing lineup of speakers. So everyone loves kids, and even the worst or the most ignorant person would not be able to think of like seeing them hurt or troubled in any way. Secondly, schools are everywhere, and by making streets around schools safer, you're actually making a large percentage of streets in your city safe. Secondly, everyone hates traffic, and pick up and drop off to school consumes a large percentage, like 20 to 30% of peak hour traffic. Imagine all that traffic being moved away to other modes. That would be so wonderful. So basically, in short, safe routes to school not only benefits children and parents of children, but the entire community as a whole. Talking about the other advantage, we did a survey a couple years ago, and the polling data showed that a person who has biked as a kid and who has continued biking as a youth is more prone to biking in their adulthood. So basically, by maximizing safe routes to school efforts, you're actually cultivating bikers like yourself for tomorrow. Aren't those all great things? So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce all our wonderful speakers for tonight, and then we'll move on to our breakouts. So we have Teresa Valles Kelly from San Mateo County Office of Education. And if you can just like say hi, so we can quickly go around the room. She's from San Mateo County Office of Education, and she'll be joining the San Mateo County room. From the San Mateo County room, we also have Mike Swire, who is our very own San Mateo City local team member. And we also have Lydia Lee from Menlo Park, who is also a proponent of Parents for Safe Routes in Menlo Park. Then from the Santa Clara County room, we have Alyssa Campbell, who's from Santa Clara County Public Health Department, overseeing safe routes to school efforts on the Santa Clara County side. We have Penny Elson, who's been a strong advocate for decades in safe routes, and I guess is one of the founding members of the entire Safe Routes to School program Palo Alto has. I know she's waving her head, but she does have made an important role to play. And then we have Arnaud Pullins. Sorry, I keep pronouncing your surname wrong. But he and he is a new parent and the Safe Routes to School Palo Alto chairperson. So these are the two advocates in the Santa Clara County room. Also from from Santa Clara County Public Health Department, we have Martha Lara, who's also going to assist Alyssa with her presentation about the county. So this is our wonderful lineup of speakers, and we will break into two rooms, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, shortly. The reason why we're breaking into these two rooms is even though like we all want to align our efforts and work towards safe routes to school for all cities and schools across both the counties, the way things work in both these counties are very distinctly different. That is why we decided let's break them out so you can understand what are the different county efforts and what are people doing to organize themselves. So we'll break into that shortly, but before that, I wanted to take one moment to talk about an action event that we're planning on October 30th. All of you here must have heard about the various fatalities that are happening in the last few weeks. And especially in Sunnyvale, it's been really, really bad. 4 fatalities, 3 pedestrians, and 1 bicyclist have been killed in a matter of a few weeks. And the response from the city has been very underwhelming. it's shocking actually, because one of our strongest teams is the city of Sunnyvale. We really adore the relationships we have with the city staff and decision makers, but the response and their overall attitude towards these incidents has been very underwhelming. And it's just not Sunnyvale alone. We've seen a lot of fatalities in so many other cities nearby. San Jose has crossed its limit. It's at 55 already just in this year, and the year is not over yet. We've seen others in Half Moon Bay, Moss Beach, and more. So we're all coming together on October 30th at Plaza del Sol in Sunnyvale to basically just in memory of all those who have died in traffic violence, and as a call to action to all the city decision makers to take action now, to prioritize safe streets today rather than waiting for like 10 years to get it implemented in their own sweet time. And to make this happen, we really need all of you to show up. We need all of you to bring your friends, families. We need all of you to spread the word in your networks and wherever possible. If you're not able to get the clout, you're not going to be able to make that impact that we want to have on these decision makers. So in today's session, I'm going to take 5 minutes of your time, and I'm going to ask all of you to send an email, a text message, post on social media, or whatever channel is comfortable to you, to spread the message about this call to action. And let me post the link in chat. So this has some sample language.
Could you send it by email as well, please?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thanks.
So this document has some sample language. It has an email draft. It has sample language for Nextdoor, sample language for social media. It also has some links for existing social media posts. So feel free to use this, feel free to customize as you like, but let's just spend 5 minutes to spread the word. And we have 50 people here. Even if each of you are able to get 2 people, that means we have 100 more people. Our target goal is to get 250 people at this event. We have 50 people signed up so far, and we're going to heavily rely on all of you guys to help us get the clout. And if you're more interested in what we're going to do at this action event, you can join the Sunnyvale team tonight. They're going to spend some time thinking about organizing and gathering all the efforts so that we can make this an impactful event. So I'm setting my timer, and I hope all of you can help us spread the word. I'm going to open the breakouts again. And once again, to talk about the format, since the Safe Routes to School efforts in both the counties are so distinct and different, we're breaking into 2 separate rooms, one to focus on San Mateo County efforts and one to focus on Santa Clara County efforts. Feel free to join. Either you don't have to be a resident of a county to be in that room. I'm opening the rooms right now, and you'll be able to manually enter the room of your choice. If you're not able to do that, let us know and we'll put you there.
We are in the San Mateo County breakout room. We're going to talk about Safe Routes to School. Again, today joining us is Teresa Velez Kelly from the San Mateo County Office of Education. Some of you will probably already know who she is because of the amazing work that her office does all throughout San Mateo County. Her work and the work of folks in South San Francisco were featured during our bike summit earlier this summer as part of our awards. Yeah, they won the program of the year for the Every Kid Deserves a Bike program. So they were helped there, and they do all sorts of other great programming. So thank you again, Teresa, for joining us. I'm going to pull up your presentation so we can get going. And then after Teresa, we're going to have Mike and Lydia do brief presentations. Depending on the flow, we might stop for Q&A in between. Otherwise, we can just go right through it. afterwards, after we hit that 6-minute mark, we'll go back into our 6-hour mark. We're going to go back into our original room and then go into our local team breakout sessions. Okay, almost there. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself now. Teresa, you can just be as direct as possible. Next slide or whatever. Or next.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so hi everybody. I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of Safe Routes to School in San Mateo County. Many of you already know the benefits of Safe Routes to School, and you probably have all heard of the 6 E's: engineering, encouragement, evaluation, education, engagement, and equity. The San Mateo County Office of Education Safe Routes to School program focuses mostly on education and encouragement and engagement, with some engineering sprinkled in there as well. So the CDC has recognized Safe Routes to School as one of a handful of programs that are cost effective and show significant population health impacts. And these are just some of the impacts that it shows: everything from traffic safety to cost savings because kids are walking and biking to school, community connectedness. Kids become more independent and get to know their neighborhoods better when they walk and bike, healthier students who are ready for school when they arrive, and a better climate and cleaner air. Next slide. So the way the San Mateo County program works, it's a little bit different from other counties, is we have a grant program. We have actually several different pots of funding for Safe Routes, but our main pot is a grant program. And it was initially started by CCAG back in 2011, where they used the San Mateo County Office of Education as a pass-through agency for Safe Routes to School funding to get it to schools. And then schools and districts could apply for funding, and then my office helps them implement their work plan during the year. So back in 2020, the Transportation Authority, because of Measure W, set some funding aside and kind of joined in on that grant program. So while the CCAG funding funds education and encouragement, the TA funding funds small capital infrastructure and special projects that the CCAG funding can't pay for, like crossing guards. We have several schools and districts that applied for crossing guards. In 2014, we had applied, this is before my time, we applied for an ATP Cycle 1 non-infrastructure grant. We weren't able to access that funding till 2017. And surprisingly, we're still spending down that funding, and we're planning on having it all spent by January 31st. It's a silver lining of the pandemic that Caltrans gave us as much time as we wanted to finish spending the funding. So that's been really great. And we were able to do a couple different things, a lot of things with that, but with that extra time, we were able to use that last year to pilot the school travel fellowship, which I'll talk about in a few slides. And then in 2018, we applied for funding from the Office of Traffic Safety. We based our grant application on a report that the public health system did called Creating Safer Streets Near Schools. And we started out by targeting those 10 schools that were highlighted in the Office of Traffic Safety report as being within a half mile of an unsafe intersection. Next slide, please. So this is just more information about our grant program. So last year we had 18 grantees for our non-infrastructure program through CCAG. We gave away $236,000, and we had 9 grantees for the TA program, gave $105,000. This year, we do not have CCAG funding because we're at the end of a 5-year cycle for OBAG 3 funding. So we decided we didn't have the funding to put out a grant program. So instead, CCAG has set aside some funding so that we can provide services to schools instead of grants. And the grant program for CCAG will return in the spring 2023. But meanwhile, the TA funding is still available, and we have 12 grantees, and we awarded $130,000 in that. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go back for a second? Sorry. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the projects that we awarded for the TA funding this year. So everything from multimodal trail connections to schools, that was in, I believe, El Granada on the coast, to crosswalk improvements, bike, scooters, skateboard racks, crossing guard programs, bike sheds and bike repair. We have one high school that, or a couple high schools that we're funding for their bike shed and bike repair programs, and then covered bike lockers and scooters and skateboard docks. Okay, next slide. These is just some of our service providers that we partner with to do education and encouragement. So like I said, we don't have that funding this year from CCAG, but we do have in terms of the grant program, but we do have some funding set aside. So we'll be partnering with a few of these providers to send them out to schools to do bicycle and pedestrian education with students. Next slide, please. This has animation, so you just need to click. Okay, so these are just a few of the things that we created during the pandemic. We have been fortunate to work with AmeriCorps Fellows since 2018, and they've been awesome because we might have an idea, but we don't have time to implement it. And they like take it and run with it and do something way better than we ever imagined. So this was back in 2020. Our AmeriCorps Fellows at the time created a virtual escape room that was a Star Wars theme room, and there were like videos and different puzzles that students had to figure out in order to get to the next room. And they learned pedestrian and bicycle education along the way. So this was Baby Yoda's Safe Journey. Next slide, please. And then last year, our AmeriCorps Fellows created this. We have Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, which you may or may not know started in San Mateo County. And they created a virtual walk through history, which teaches about Ruby Bridges, but also about pedestrian safety and how to stay safe when you're out walking. So next slide, please. And then our AmeriCorps Fellow last year, she kind of took over our Safe Routes to School newsletter. So every month she would have a different theme. And this was for Black History Month for February. And she did a whole newsletter on African-American game changers in the world of transportation. And it was so well received that the next month, can you go to the next? She did one, because it was Women's History Month, on women in transportation. And so then every month that was kind of like the new thing, like just kind of let's highlight a different group of people and show, you know, their work in transportation. I'm not sure if there's more. Oh yeah. And then this was another one of our AmeriCorps Fellows last year. She created this for Earth Day because Earth Day is a walk and bike to school encouragement day. And so she created, she was thinking about like when you go to a national park and you do a junior ranger activities and you get a little badge that you get to wear. So we created a badge that kids could get after they did this Earth Day scavenger hunt, which would take them out on their neighborhood and either they're on foot or on their bike. They turned it into their school office and then they got their little badge and they were an Earth Day explorer. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, go back one. Back. Yeah. Okay. So back in 2020, when we all thought that, you know, everything was going to go back to normal in fall of 2020, like little did we know it wouldn't. We decided we wanted to help cities support students as they return to school in person. So we had this back to school travel meeting, and we invited cities from across the county to send people on, and it was really well received and like really great, but then nobody went back to school in the fall. So last summer, when we knew everyone was going to go back to school a year ago, last summer, so what was that, 2021, we had another webinar, and we called it Supporting Back to School Travel with Equity and Empathy. And we invited Mark Fenton, who had done our previous webinar, to come and talk about how schools could, or how cities could support safe school travel, because we knew that everyone was going to be returning to school in the fall. So his big thing is like focusing on the 3 Ps: programs, projects, and policies. So it was really great, and people came and they really loved it. But we realized afterwards, like, okay, well, now what? Like people, you know, you go to a great conference or you go to a great webinar, and then you go to work and you get busy and you forget, like, you know, what was that he said? So can you go to the next slide? So we came up with this idea of, next slide. We came up with this idea of creating a school travel fellowship. And it was just kind of an idea we had that let's invite cities to apply for not funding, but for services and technical assistance, where they could focus on 1 or 2 schools in their city, and they could do some kind of a safe routes to school related project, not infrastructure, nothing infrastructure, but non-infrastructure, safe routes to school related project. So we would say this all the time last year, we were building the plane while we were flying it. Like we kind of like, people would say like, hey, well, what about this? Or what about that? And we're like, oh, that's a really great idea. We didn't think of that. So I'd like to think that, can you go to the next slide? I'd like to think that we built the plane and we brought it in for a smooth landing in September. We had our capstone event where we had the city teams come and they gave their presentations. And this is what they got. So this was the flyer for the fellowship. And then they got technical assistance and support from Alta Planning and Design, some non-permanent build materials. And then there were quarterly meetings that we had. And then they also had their own individual sessions with Alta Planning and Design. And each of our quarterly meetings had different speakers. Like we had someone come and talk about how to do like a pop-up, like how do you go about doing that? And we had you probably all have heard of Mr. Barricade, Vignesh, I can't remember his last name. He's in the South Bay. Anyway, he came and talked one time, and it was just kind of like, just, you know, to give people some more information about how they could support their schools. So next slide. So our team selection, it was super simple application, and our scoring rubric was super simple. We just looked at the breadth and diversity of team. We asked that all the teams that applied, it was cities had to apply, and we asked that there be a city planner or a city engineer on the team. They could invite an elected official to be on the team. They had to invite someone from the school, had to be on the team as well. So we looked at breadth and diversity of teams. We looked at the project innovation scope and feasibility, like how feasible was it to get it done? Because we literally only had 6 months to do it. We actually had to extend that time because we realized it wasn't enough time. And then project location, and then looking at an equity consideration, like how is this going to affect all kids and getting kids to school, especially kids in more under-resourced areas of the county. Next slide, please. So these were our teams. We had Daly City, South City, San Mateo, East Palo Alto, and Redwood City. And the projects were everything from, like, in Daly City, they did, I don't think I have a picture of it, but they did some crosswalk enhancements out near the Bayshore School. And they were temporary, but they were so well received that they just ended up leaving them up. They were supposed to only stay up, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks, but they left them up all summer. And now the city is looking for funding to make these more permanent. And one of the ways that the city said they knew that this was really well received was they didn't get one single complaint. Like, nobody called and complained to the city. So they were really happy about that. The school was really happy. San Mateo is also doing some crosswalk enhancements. South San Francisco, the fellowship supported their Every Kid Deserves a Bike program, which won Project of the Year from the Bike Coalition, the summit. East Palo Alto, this just went up, I think, last week, because as I said, we had to extend the time period. They did a temporary roundabout near one of the schools. And then Redwood City did, I think Alta provided them with some plans and some designs for a pop-up that I don't think that they've done yet. Okay, next slide. So the next slide I'm going to talk to you about and show you, but I have to warn you, I am not an expert in this area, and Alta Planning and Design did this for us, and it would be really great if we could get them to come back to one of your meetings and talk you through all these slides, but I'm going to show you what they did because I think it's really cool. They did a high injury network for us. Next slide, please. So they looked at Switter's collision data, and they looked at all of the schools that are in San Mateo County. They looked at road centerline network, which represents all roads in San Mateo County, and it's provided by the county's GIS enterprise database. They excluded interstates, freeways, and other limited access roads. And then they, like I said, they looked at collision data for all collisions occurring from 2014 through 2020, and they used the TIMS, the Transportation Injury Mapping System, for that. Okay, next slide. And they were looking at severity. So they weighted the data based on these three factors: severity, active mode, like if the collision involved a person walking or bicycling, and then youth involvement. Next slide, please. And then they progressively added road segments to the high injury network in the order indicated by the severity index. So they weren't aiming for a network that that's not every single road, but showcasing the areas with the most problems. And they captured the most collisions in the smallest network. So what they said was that this was somewhat arbitrary, but it was informed by the inflection point on the graph. Next slide, please. And then they manually removed residential streets that don't make sense, like that, and they were checking for proximity to schools. So they were looking at proximity to schools so that they could see like which schools were on a high injury network. Next slide, please. And then here's what they found. They found that that 325.8 total miles, so 10.4% of the total network was high injury, and then the majority is concentrated in population centers, which makes sense, right? Because more people, more cars, more traffic. 96% of the high injury network is within a mile of a school, and 28% is within a mile of a high free and reduced priced meal school. So like a school that might be like a Title I school. So 3 crash factors accounted for 55% of all collisions. So they were unsafe speed, improper turning, and then vehicle failure to yield right of way. Next slide. And then for all pedestrians, most collisions occurred while crossing at an intersection. And for youth, they're more likely than adults to be hit while crossing outside of a crosswalk. So you know, you see a lot. I have one that likes to cross like wherever he feels like it. And I tell him all the time not to do that, but okay, next slide, please. This is data from our parent caregiver survey from the 2020-2021 parent groups caregiver survey. And the top 3 concerns pretty much have never changed since I've been in this position. I've been here for almost 7 years with Safe Routes to School, and speeding traffic along the route, unsafe intersections, and too much traffic along the route are always the top 3. Next slide, please. Okay, so they Alta provided some resources for San Mateo County cities, and they're available to all of you. This is just an example. So this is an example of like they did a 1-pager for each city. So this was all done through, some of you may have been on the community advisory committee that met, I think we met every other month. And they gave feedback, like what did they want? Like what did the cities want? What would be useful to them? So this is an example of what each city got. This was sent to every public works director in the county. And then it's also available on the CCAG site. Okay, next slide. They also did, I'm just going to go through this really quick. So Safe Routes to School strategic plan. So these were just some identified goals to increase the number of families safely using active transportation, develop a sustainable Safe Routes program, deliver the program with an equity lens, and measure progress and evaluate impacts. Next slide. And then the county program, we've tried to, so these are just some areas like priority school areas that we like, that Alta is suggesting that we focus on because of where they're located in the county. A lot of these schools were also on that initial report that the public health system did back in like 2017 when they did the Creating Safer Streets for Schools. Okay, next. Okay, and I'm just going to end with this. So this is Ruby Bridge's Walk to School Day. You may have heard of it, maybe you didn't. It started with a group of students at Martin Elementary School in South San Francisco. When they were learning about Ruby Bridges, they were wondering if they thought that there should be a day to celebrate her. because she was so courageous. So they realized there was not a day. They asked their school board to pass a resolution making November 14th Ruby Bridges Day. Can you go to the next slide? So it started here with this group of students, and what happened was we heard about Ruby Bridges Day, and we were like, this would make an awesome walk to school day. So Safe Routes to School helped them turn it into a walk to school day, and we created a website. We worked with one of our vendors who created a really cool song called Walk to School Like Ruby Did. You can click again. We created a video. This is all on our Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day website, but we created a video which has some of those original students in it, kind of talking about the background about Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. Next, click again. We had collateral and just informational cards that were sent out, and then we like promoted this like across the Bay Area and across the country. Like every time we were at a national conference in Florida before the pandemic, and we kind of weaseled our way up on stage and promoted it. And anyway, the first National Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day was in 2020 during the pandemic. There were a lot of participation, even though we were in the middle of the pandemic. Go to the next slide. And Ruby Bridges herself heard about it because the students met her right before the pandemic started. Go to the next slide. Right before the pandemic, they met her at an event that we took them to in Sacramento, and she restarted her foundation and made Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day one of the initiatives. It is has caught fire like across the country. And there's another slide. And Josh Becker passed a resolution in last September proclaiming November 14th as Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day in the state of California. Click again. And Ruby Bridges, like I said, restarted her foundation. Click again. And there's one more, I think. And should be one more. And we're featured in a book called Rush Hour. I met the author. I introduced her to the students at Martin Elementary, and she wrote about them and included them in this book, which is about our global traffic jam, and really encourages kids to walk and bike to school. And we were able to use some of our funding from the Office of Traffic Safety, and we sent one of these books to every school in the county for their library. Next slide. So just thinking about the future of Safe Routes to School, this is just kind of our vision that, you know, our efforts will result in less traffic congestion around schools, improve air quality, greener, healthier community, all that great stuff that we all want, and make it safer for kids to walk and bike to school. And this last little picture, Slow the Fast Down, we have a lot of vinyl banners that say this. I sent out an email to every school asking, like, do you want one of these banners, like to put up, you know, on a fence or whatever, like around your school? And I didn't hear from very many. So if you know of any schools that want a Slow the Fast Down banner, let me know and I'll be happy to send them one. And I think I probably went over my time. I'm sorry that I'm done.
I'm surprised they weren't jumping to get one of those banners.
You know, it might have been like the timing. I don't know. I'll have to think about it again.
Okay. Gosh, we got two. I need to know how do I back out of here? Stop share? I think that's right. We are backed out of time. Teresa, do you have time beyond 6 p.m.?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I took.
No.
There was like so much, like, I mean, I feel like
is.
I even just told you like a little bit about what we're doing. I could tell
And by
you.
the time we got into this room, we're already 20 after. So what I'm proposing, Heather, I'm looking at you, if this is okay for some folks, maybe spend, because we're going to get yanked out around 6. Would everyone here in the San Mateo County breakout room, would you be okay maybe coming to, maybe, because we're going to break out into our local teams, do you all want to meet in a local team breakout room, continue this conversation for like 15 minutes?
I think we need to push through. The Redwood City team has a full docket already.
Okay.
So we're not going to be able to encroach into that. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, Mike, I was told that you participated in that fellowship program. So I'm just going to say you're next. And you should have sharing access. Let me know if you don't.
And how long do you want me to speak?
7-8 minutes.
Okay. All right. Let me know how I'm doing. I'll
Okay.
you up. Okay. Can you guys see that?
It's coming up. You're good.
All right, sorry, this computer's slow, so it might, oh shoot, wrong button. Okay, so thanks everyone. My name is Mike Swire. I'm on the San Mateo SVBC team, or Move San Mateo as we call it. I actually live in Hillsborough, and I can talk a little bit about some of the stuff we've done there too. But I call this kind of the Trojan horse, because I think Sanjay alluded to it a second ago, is I think it's a great way for any project to get done is through a Safe Routes to School lens, because I think it is easier and more impactful, and I can talk about that in a sec. So here's some of the wins that we've had over the years. The first couple are 15 miles an hour lower speed limits around schools, and I'll go into a little more technical detail about what that is and how you do it. But in 2020, we got that implemented in Hillsborough. It was a very efficient process. From suggestion to implementation was under a year. 2021, we got the city of San Mateo to agree to do it across 100 plus locations, well, 30 plus schools, but 100 plus streets, I believe. We're still waiting on adoption. It's actually the 1 year anniversary yesterday, and I talked to the mayor, and it's coming, but it's not coming fast, unfortunately. But most cities that do that actually do it very quickly. The big project I'll talk about is earlier this year, we installed 2.3 miles of Class 2 bike lanes around San Mateo High School, including the removal of 225 on-street parking, or I should say car storage. And then I'm also involved with, as Teresa said, the San Mateo Team Fellowship Program. Now I have time, I'll get into that, but let me keep going. So 15 miles an hour near school, I think it's a great project for people just getting into this area. It's fast, it's easy, it's not less controversial, and it's a good way to build a movement for bigger ticket projects. Basically what this does is, I'm sure you're familiar with our arcane speed limit rules in California, whereby you're supposed to set the speed limit at the 85th percentile, which means that the faster people drive, the faster the speed limit is. It doesn't make sense, but that's the rule. Fortunately, there was one carve out in 2008 whereby the school or the state said that cities can lower the speed limit around schools within 500 to 1,000 feet as low as 15 miles an hour, but the rules are kind of complex depending on how big the road is and how fast the speed limit is today. But basically in any residential area, you should be able to get it down to 15, which if you've ever seen the statistics on how crashes impact pedestrians, the difference between 15, 25, and certainly 35 is huge in terms of making sure they don't happen and make sure that nobody dies. Why speed limits? I know a lot of people say speed limits don't matter. They do matter. They're not always followed, but no law is always followed. But speed, as we saw earlier, is the #1 cause of crashes. Again, this is something that's not politically too objectionable. It's low cost and easy to implement. You're talking about a couple $100 to maybe $1,000 a sign. That's a lot less than some other things. Obviously, the slower speeds helps pedestrians, it helps cyclists. Very importantly, it's going to help you build a alliance with a bunch of groups and people that will help you for future battles. And a lot of cities have already done this. So in San Mateo County, Hillsborough, Burlingame, San Mateo, San Carlos just did it. They're implementing it. I think that might be it. I'm not as familiar further up north, but if anyone wants to work on this, I'll include my email and I can provide kind of technical support to make it happen. So our big project though for this year was the implementation of not the North Central, but the San Mateo High bike lanes. This was a huge to-do. There's a big city council election going on now, and this is one of the major talking points. A lot of the parking files are not happy with it, but we basically got 2.3 miles of lanes installed. We made the local newspaper several times. We were on KQED, etc., and it was an immense win. So it's basically on Humboldt Street and Poplar, the two streets that kind of intersect at San Mateo High School. So I think for this audience, I want to focus on how did we win, or what can you guys hopefully take from our effort to improve yours. So first of all, this started off as, quote, the North Central project, bike lane project. And I think it's very important, again, to frame things in a Safe Routes to School or kids context. When it was framed as the North Central bike lane project, agency and ownership was thought of from a North Central perspective. And North Central were the primary people getting their parking spaces taken away. So in all of our communications, we changed this to the San Mateo High Bike Lane Project. You know, it's not an official thing. It's not on the city website. But when I talked to KQED, when I talked to the newspaper, we would always use that. And we actually got some traction on that. So I think controlling the message is very important. Along those veins, obviously, whenever you talk safety being the primary issue, you should bring up past tragedies and get specific and get how the problem will be solved through your actions. That gets attention. It's very hard for people who are in favor of parking spots to argue against saving lives. Okay, what else here? Other kind of best practices. So leverage students. This was primarily a high school project. So we got a bunch of students to issue public comments at city council meetings, do letters to the editor, letters to council, and that just brightens their day. They're sick of hearing from cyclists and other grumpy residents. They love to hear from 15, 16-year-olds with smiles on their faces and changing the world that they're going to live in. Also, look at kind of non-traditional stakeholders. You know, the high school had a green team. The school board includes a lot of aspiring politicians that one day want to run for city council and make a name for themselves. The parent-teacher organization has a lot of parents, obviously, that don't want their kids to get hurt. And even staff. The superintendent, I found out, of the SMUSH district, San Mateo Union High School District, bikes to school. So he was actually very helpful to us. Other tools you can use, obviously petitions are always great. One, it's pretty. Two, it builds credibility. Three, you build a list of people that communicate and show up at meetings. This is actually the petition we used for the 50-mile-an-hour slow speeds, but we did something similar for the bike lanes, and we sequenced those so we would build upon the success of both of them. What else do we have here? You want to use visuals, obviously, in a lot of your communications. So what we did, kind of what Teresa was talking about, we built this high injury network around the school. So basically these two blue lines are kind of the big streets that were impacted. And we showed that all these crashes are happening around San Mateo High. This is actually the highest traffic rate or collision rate in the city. And then on the right, you can see we also showed the density of schools. Schools are basically everywhere. So bang for your buck. These are great projects to really impact a lot of people and get people off the street. Another thing we talked about or should talk about is local media. It's a little intimidating the first time you talk to the media, but these are great stories for people. People love kids. People love neighborhood controversy. People, you know, most journalists are young, and you know, even KQED, the woman I talked to was 19 years old and a student at UCLA. It was like in an internship, and she totally was into it. Basically, I just called them up, said, "Here's what we want to do," and we were in the news the next day. One thing that's great with the media I'd always recommend is create a cheat sheet of like 10 quotes that you want to use. And no matter what they ask you, just repeat the quotes or say what you want to say. Don't answer hard questions. I'm sure you've seen that from politicians, but eventually those will get on the news. You know, it can work. Let me just see. I'll just play this real quick. And we might have bandwidth issues. You're supposed to hear the doo-doo from KQED. Okay.
I won't hear it, Mike. And we're really short on time right now.
Okay, I will stop that and send it out to everyone. I'll also
can we get that that file so we can send it out in a recap blog?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Should I stop or keep going?
Heather, I need some advice here.
Finish the slide.
Sure.
Finish the slide.
That's all I we've got some fun videos to take out. I'll include a link to those. Make sure to talk frequently with council, really make them shine. We also try to be the good guys, and we created new parking programs for the people that were impacted. So it looked like we were you know, looking for a win-win solution as opposed to just slapping in bike lanes and running. Take advantage of or definitely identify when disadvantaged or low income or elderly communities are impacted. The city councils are very sensitive to that. We use Spanish language in a lot of communications because this was a heavily Spanish speaking district. helped the staff win. We were very communicative with staff and saying, here's what we think the objections are, to make sure that they could respond to objections. And finally, don't be afraid to use FUD, in terms of fear, uncertainty, doubt about, why is the parking a problem? Well, there's commercial trucks on the street, or people aren't using their driveways or their garages, etc. I even developed a photo album that I can send out of 180 empty parking spots when people complain that 200 parking spots were being taken away. They weren't all being used. So that's all I have. Here's my name and email if you guys have questions, and hope you guys can do some safe routes to school.
Thanks, Mike. That's awesome. Actually, I have questions, and I'll probably follow up with you individually on that. We only have 5 minutes. So Heather, what I'm going to propose, Jules, would it be okay if we hosted Lydia for an extended breakout for like 15, 20 minutes tops, 15, 20?
Fine by me.
Okay. So anybody who is not in Redwood City that has things going on, please join us in the North San Mateo County breakout room. That'll pop up here in the next couple minutes. And we'll have Lydia do her presentation. And then for those that are going to be in your Redwood City breakouts, or in your, maybe you just chose not to do it, we are going to record it and we're going to send it out to everyone in a recap blog. So even if you do miss it, you're going to be able to review it after the fact. So we're going to get yanked out here in the next couple of minutes, but I think it would be appropriate to maybe field a question or two from anybody. Feel free to unmute and talk, or raise your hand, whichever.
I have a question. Have you done any analysis on how effective the implementation of the 15-mile-an-hour has been in terms of actual compliance by drivers?
And this is for Mike, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have not. You can look at anecdotal, or sorry, there are studies in general. I think Seattle had one about, does lowering speed limits impact speeds, and it does. Again, it's not perfect, and people will always say there's that person going 70 in the 15 zone, but most people follow the speed limit, or even if they don't follow it, they say I'm going to go 5 miles an hour above, in which case I'd rather have it be 15 plus 5 than 25 or 30 plus 5. But it's really hard to get data like that, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I have a question for Teresa. I'm new to this assembly, so nice to meet you all. Teresa, is there any program or any thought in place to put together a bicycle driving training program in schools in San Mateo?
Teaching kids how to ride their bikes? Is that what you're saying?
Teaching kids how to ride their bikes in traffic.
Like in traffic. So what we do right now with our bike rodeos that we partner with SVBC and other service providers, they're not taking them out into traffic. They're like kind of simulating what they might run into. I know it's not the same, but on the school grounds.
No, that works. The reason
Yeah.
I asked the question, in some countries in the world, like in the Netherlands, to graduate from 4th grade, you have to pass the class. It is done actually mostly on school grounds, but the final test is actually done out on the road.
I love that idea. I have a friend that lives in the Netherlands, and she talks about the thousands of bikes that are at different events that she goes to because nobody drives.
I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and I was watching a whole bunch of parents pick up their children from school on a bicycle. There were no cars.
It's awesome.
Anyway, thank you.
I think the unofficial slogan for SVBC is "in the Netherlands."
I think that's the slogan for all bike enthusiasts.
Yeah.
I'll use Belgium then. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, what I hear is in Palo Alto, that's what I hear for San Mateo County. Well, in Palo Alto, they do this and they do that. So I guess they're kind of like our Netherlands.
Well, I'm going to see what I can do here in Redwood City.
Great.
So just to recap here, Lydia is going to be joining us in the North San Mateo County breakout room, and you'll see that option here when we go back into our main room. Teresa, you're welcome to join us to listen in and then answer any questions afterwards. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. for being here. Teresa is also very accessible. So if you do have any questions you want to ask offline, let me know and I'll pass on contact info. Mike shared that as well. So things we didn't get to, you can always follow up offline.
I am based in Menlo Park. I've lived here for 1,000,000 years. I got involved after I had kids. I started pushing them out in a jogging stroller, which then became a bike trailer, then tag-along bikes. And now they're in high school. So in that process, I was just really disappointed by the bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the city. So I joined the Complete Streets Commission, and I served on that for 8 years. And then I also signed up to be a Safe Routes to School representative of my kids' school. So, so this is an example. This is a case study of a street that's really near the middle school in Menlo Park. It's a busy street that is an alternate spot that parents have like glommed onto because it's not part of the official drop-off there, and so it had this really tempting shoulder, as you can see. That there's these, ineffective no parking stopping signs in that hedge there that everyone just ignored. So it was really common for people to come here in the mornings, especially, and just stop here, open the door, let their kids out. And so the straw that really broke the camel's back was that a bicyclist, got doored by a car, fell off, broke their collarbone. And this was after, many parents had raised their concerns. And then the thing that was really crazy making for everyone was that the driver continued to park illegally in that same spot and would do the same thing. So I documented this as the Safe Routes to School representative for the middle school. I documented it and put some pictures together, sent it to Public Works. And as Teresa knows very well, the engineering E is super expensive. And so the Public Works decided to take a first step and say, okay, what's the sort of like the smallest intervention we can do just to see if that helps? Like, we can make the case, let's just try this. So someone came out and put a red stripe on it. And as you might guess, it didn't work. So, I don't think if they had painted that whole shoulder red, it would have made any difference. People were just so used to it. There were sporadic attempts at enforcement, but without, it's just too tempting. People were too used to it. So then we made the case, hey, look, Public Works, it's not working. Then they put in some bollards, which was a relatively inexpensive thing to do. They didn't have to go to city council and ask for money or resources. It was like something low key that they could just do on their own. And everything seemed great. But as I have come to know in all my years, even the most obvious kinds of safety improvements tend to get pushback from people. Like, just change is hard. A longtime neighbor nearby was not happy. So they wrote to city council, they came to different meetings, they objected very vociferously. They came up with all sorts of safety issues that they had. Fortunately, there were a lot of parents who had been keeping their eye on the street, and so we were able to kind of collectively counter their safety concerns. The one thing that we couldn't really concern was that, yes, there was like leaves in that area. And based on pretty much that, Public Works is going to remove the bollards. So, the squeaky wheel gets the most grease. So, so we started a letter writing campaign. We talked about how everything was so much better, that they really were essential. And so Public Works figured out a way to clear the leaves. And they also, which I think was very strategic of them, they reduced the number of bollards so that the visual impact was not quite the same, showing the neighbors that they were willing to make concessions. And the bollards are still there today, and they are doing their job very well. Again, this is a very small stretch of road. This is not even a whole block. It's maybe 100 feet. But it's a good intervention at a very critical point. You could see how it narrows the street so cars are not tempted to make those crazy U-turns at the end of the street. Cars aren't stacking up side by side so that they can make a right turn, and just clogging up that intersection to the point where they're really endangering students and bicyclists. Nobody's been doored in that area since, as far as I know, so all good. So for your own Olive Street, for anybody who is interested, I think the first thing is to just document what you see. This is something that Public Works has to do anyway, so the more documentation you can provide, it helps them help you. I'm just a layperson. If you appoint yourself as the head of the safety issue, you can be the focal point for people who also have those issues. That said, these efforts are very rarely, one person making a lot of noise. It's a team of people that are getting together and saying, hey, this is an issue. Talk to your elected city council members. They're residents too, and they need support from their constituency to make change. They don't want to go out on a limb and offend people, but if they know they have the public support of a lot of voters, they're more likely to get on board. Number 5, describe, don't prescribe. This is a big one because a lot of residents will see a problem and then they have the perfect solution. And this kind of cuts out Public Works, takes out the sort of collaborative efforts that I think are important to getting these kinds of projects done, which is that, as lay people, our job is to highlight the problem, but not come up with the solution, because you don't know what constraints there are and what the latest guidelines are, what state guidelines are. And that's, why do we have Public Works people? We hire them to help us make the best decisions. And lastly, don't be shy, because if it's a safety concern, there's really no way you can be too loud, I think, when it comes to a safety concern. And you don't want a situation where something really bad happens and then you get heard. If you speak up beforehand, you're laying the groundwork for something to do happen. And if it doesn't happen until that terrible thing happens, at least you've, at least moved the ball that much further. So thanks. And then here's my information if anybody wants to get in touch and talk about being a layperson advocate. All right. That was me.
Very cool. That is so cool. I do have one question.
Sure.
So I don't understand why leaves was one of the reasons they wanted to remove the bollards. Was it cluttering in the area, or?
So basically, anytime you make any substantial change to a street, I think people will latch onto whatever arguments seem to, whatever they can pull up. So in this case, because you're sectioning off part of the street with those bollards, the street sweeper isn't coming across and doing the normal cleaning. It's just harder to get in there. And nowadays some cities have specialized equipment for getting into bike lanes in order to clean them. This is a sort of not just an isolated issue to Menlo Park. Of course, Menlo Park's not going to buy specialized equipment just for one little stretch, but this is a maintenance issue, right? So I think the person who was uncomfortable with the change was really looking for, I don't know if they even psychologically admit to themselves that they were just looking for reasons to be unhappy, but that was the one that we didn't really have any immediate counter to, so
it doesn't sound like it was very compelling either. It wasn't very compelling either.
So yeah, but in some ways it doesn't even matter what that objection is. You just need to kind of push the safety concerns and say, whatever your objections are, the street is safer now. So.
Okay. Anybody have questions? Jules, Gerald, Nathan, Heidi. Hi, Heidi.
Hi.
Before we let Teresa or Lydia go, any questions?
None from me.
Okay. Thank you so much again for being flexible, you two. Could have gone smoother, did it? But I thought that it still went well. We have recordings for our members that weren't able to be here with us. So, thank you again for joining us. I have your contact info, and it's okay for me to share it with the rest of the team. Okay, cool. So, all right, you are free to go, and you can reclaim your Wednesday afternoon / evening. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.